Hi, everybody. Welcome to Module 4, Human Rights and Social Justice. This is the foundation of social work, so I hope you enjoy the reading. I'm going to talk about some of the relevance to clients today. So this week, read Chapter 4. You're going to take the Chapter 4 quiz. You're also going to want to start thinking about your first case study discussion board. And if there's enough student interest, I'm going to host a office hours session via Google Hangouts. So if you're interested in that, we're going to talk about the case study and how you can be successful on the first assignment. Please send me an email with the times and dates that work best for you so I can try to accommodate and as many people can participate as possible. We also have an extra credit video this week, so watch that as well before you take the quiz. So what is injustice? We throw the word around a lot. It's a big word, and that's because it happens all the time. Sorry to be a little bit pessimistic, but it's true. We see injustice everywhere depending on the definition that you use. So this definition is in your book. It's coercively established and maintained inequalities, discrimination and dehumanizing, developing inhibiting conditions of living imposed by dominant social groups upon dominated and exploited groups. So this can look like poverty, this can look like unemployment, homelessness, hunger, lack of access to medical supplies, to medications. It can look like an unequal education system. So in our code of ethics, we are charged with kind of battling injustice as we see it. And when you start working with individual clients, as many of you may have already in the past, you can't help but notice some of the systemic trends that are contributing to issues such as poverty, which we learned about last week, or mental health. So these are complicated issues that individuals find themselves kind of stuck in a system that they did not create. So in order to truly help the individual, we also need to be looking at the system all the time to see where there's room for positive change. So here are some important definitions as we're kind of venturing into these conversations, which everybody is venturing into right now in current events as it is anyways, so it's good to be aware of what these words mean. Prejudice is an attitude, prejudicial attitude about a group of people or associations with certain types of people. That would be prejudice. Fears. Discrimination is when you start to actually take action based on those prejudicial attitudes. Oppression is systemic and pervasive based on membership to a certain group. So oppression is when anytime I do not receive a benefit or something negative is happening to me because of who I am as a person, right? So institutionalized discrimination is built into norms and institutions. So that may be racism, sexism, ableism, classism. So an example of institutionalized discrimination with classism might be the fact that in our education system, a lot of times funding for schools is based on property taxes. While that's a classist kind of way of obtaining funding because property taxes are much higher in nicer neighborhoods and are more easily often collected. So that results in nicer schools and nicer neighborhoods and not so nice schools with less funding in neighborhoods of a lower socioeconomic status. So that's one of many, many examples we could talk about. I'll talk more about institutionalized discrimination when we talk about criminal justice and mass incarceration, particularly of African American men and women and other people of color as well. So we'll get more into that later. Stay tuned for that conversation. So there are some different explanations as to why people are prejudiced, and I won't go too far in depth into any of them, but I do want to point out that the Southern Poverty Law Center tracks something called a hate map. So for those of you who are kind of wondering if, racism is still an issue in America today, I encourage you to look up some kind of statistics about Mass incarceration would be a great example. You can look at the hate map the Southern Poverty Law Center maintains, which tracks different organized registered hate groups, such as those affiliated with white nationalism or the Ku Klux Klan. Those still exist, and that's not even covert racism. That's overt, blatant racism happening all over the country. Now, I would argue that kind of covert racism is more detrimental in a lot of ways. However, just for your reference, I want you to know that these groups are still out there. Anti-LGBTQ groups are active as well. So this is just a map that tries to track them. So when we talk about these issues, we're also talking about intergroup relationships and kind of this idea that America is a great melting pot of assimilating cultures. So social work in general largely rejects the whole melting pot idea and kind of takes more of a cultural pluralism approach, which would be like the analogy is that if there's a melting pot, cultural pluralism is more like, a big salad where all us individuals are different with different cultures and different ideas, and when we're combined, we're stronger and can learn from each other in new ways. So a conflicting idea to this would be separatism. So separatism is the idea that people of a certain cultural or identity should just stick together in their own community, which there's some cons and pros to that because being with people who are like you creates a sense of solidarity and safety. But at the same time, separatism isn't really seen as a viable option the way our world works today in practicality. So those are some of the different concepts around intergroup relations. So overcoming injustice. The book lays out a lot of different policies that social workers were really have always been kind of pushing for, right? So social workers are involved in public policy and social justice issues now. That trend has changed over the years because a lot more social workers are becoming therapists or working in kind of community mental health. So that advocacy piece is still there. There's a policy track that you can take if you get your master's degree in social work. And our code of ethics, as I said, encourages all of us to be politically active and to visit our representatives and speak up against injustice. I personally make a point to do this. There's lots of advocacy days. I know that interacting with politics can be intimidating for a lot of people, but as students, there's tons of student groups who are politically active. So we have a social work day at the legislature. If anybody wants to go, let me know. It's coming up. And we have them every year. There's also addiction advocacy days. If you're interested in some of the bills that are being looked at locally when it comes to addiction, please let me know because I visit the legislature and talk to different representatives about those bills. So Good Samaritan laws, things like that, if you're familiar at all, are being looked at right now. So a Good Samaritan law just means if somebody is dying of an overdose or of alcohol poisoning and you call 911, the way it is now, potentially you could get in trouble for paraphernalia charges or underage drinking. However, we're trying to get a bill passed where if you call 911 because your friend is sick and needs help, you will be immune from getting any sort of charges for drinking or paraphernalia. So this would encourage people to call 911 and get medical attention for people who are overdosing because right now that's the biggest reason why people don't get medical attention. So policy is relevant to social workers. Please email me, let me know if you're interested in learning more about that. But these are some of the important kind of policies and amendments. Americans with Disability Act of 1990 was huge, that social workers have been advocating for in the past and will continue to make sure that voting rights and whatnot are upheld in our current system. So as I said, the Code of Ethics has a commitment to social justice and I ask you, even if you're not a social worker, what are some things that you can do in your life, regardless of your field, for social justice, because it's relevant for everyone. So whatever that looks like for you, whether it's just interacting with people in more of an empathetic manner and truly listening to their story and validating their experiences of oppression rather than perpetuating the invalidation that so many people experience when they try to relay the fact that racism exists in our society. That's one way you can be an advocate of social justice, whether it's going to your local representative to talk to them about what you see in the community. Maybe it's the volunteer work that you do. Maybe it's how you are learning about racism, sexism for yourself so that you can truly understand. Whatever it is for you, there is a way for you to contribute to a more socially just society. And the great thing about our country is you are free to do and learn and be whatever it is that you want to be. So there are endless opportunities here, and there is an immense amount of work to be done. So if any of these issues interest you, let me know and we can talk more about them. So thanks for watching. So next week we're talking about diversity, and you're going to have that case study discussion board due. So keep these things in mind as you are reading through your material this week. Okay, everybody, I hope that you have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and let me know if you have any questions.